right, so we will get started. Thank you, everyone, for coming to this special edition of Dueling Detectives. Dueling Detectives is a monthly program where we pit two fictional detectives against one another to see which would solve the case first, if they were put a case towards them. But this is a special edition because we have a special guest today. I have the honor of introducing Stuart Turton. He is the author of two of my personal favorites and also my co-host's favorite books, best-selling books, The 7.5 Deaths of Evelyn Hardcastle and The Devil and the Dark Water. So before we get started, we should introduce ourselves. So my name is Tabrisha Jones, and I am the young adult librarian of the Pelham Parkway Van Ness branch of the New York Public Library.
And my name is Adina, and I am the adult librarian at the Epiphany Branch Library.
So we have an exciting event lined up. So before we get started, we just wanted to say a couple of introductory things. You could be doing a number of other things right now, but we want to thank you for being here with us today for this virtual event. We welcome readers and mystery lovers alike to what will most likely be an exciting and compelling conversation. After the discussion today, there will be some time for Q&A, and we will be monitoring the chat. So if you have a question that comes up during the conversation, please post it into the chat box, which I will tell you about on our next slide. We'll do our best to get to all of your questions. In our chat, please be mindful to adhere to the library's general policy and rules. Please be respectful to all attendees and panelists. So we're going to enter the link to our general policies and rules and regulations in our chat. And of course, as a reminder, this program, unlike our other programs, is being recorded, but you as a viewer are not. So we just want to go over a few housekeeping rules on this slide. So if you're unfamiliar with Zoom, you can mute and unmute yourself at the bottom icon that looks like a microphone. You feel free to show or unshow your camera. That's a little camera icon at the bottom. You can use the chat box to enter any questions you may have during the program. And if you need to raise your hand, you can find the raise your hand function under the reactions. And this Zoom meeting has live transcript enabled, so you can hit the live transcript button and you will see the closed captions generate if you need to have that. And if you need to leave the meeting, it is the big red button that says leave. Okay, so I will pass it on to Adina to introduce our special guest. So take it away, Adina.
All right, I apologize, we have a typo on that slide, so I'm happy to be introducing Stuart Turton and not Joseph Knox, so please ignore that, we apologize. So I'm very excited to introduce Stuart Turton, who is the author of the international bestseller, The 7.5 Deaths of Evelyn Hardcastle and The Devil in the Dark Water, which received 4-starred reviews and was praised by the New York Times as being compulsively readable. Stuart is not to be trusted in the nicest way possible, and apparently neither are we. So now I'm going to pass it back to Tabrisha to kick us off with some questions for you.
I am so sorry.
It's all right. I've met Joseph Knox. He's a very lovely man. If I'm going to be mistaken for anybody, that's absolutely great.
Oh my God. We were like all prepared and everything. We just missed that one thing. But I'm glad you're forgiving.
It's all right. It feels very mysterious, right? Like I've come in under an alias. Like I will answer to Joseph Knox and be revealed to be Stuart Turton at the end.
Well, we had an interview with Joseph Knox like a couple of months ago in April, and he seems to be that type of person. So I think he would appreciate that joke as well. So to get us started off with our discussion, you have 2 books under your belt. So we would like you to give our audiences our audience a brief synopsis of 7.5 Deaths of Evelyn Hardcastle and The Devil and the Dark Water.
So basically what you've done there is kicked it off with the hardest question imaginable, because like the synopsis for books is the worst bit of writing a book. It always comes at the end and somebody's like, hey, do you know that 130,000 words you wrote? Why don't you just make that into like 2 paragraphs? It is, all joking aside, The 7.5 Deaths of Evelyn Hardcastle is a very Agatha Christie style murder mystery. It's got an isolated manor house. It's got all sorts of upper class guests for secrets. And then one of them dies, as is the style. And the twist of the book is that our detective, every time he doesn't solve the mystery, the day starts again. So it's exactly the same day, it's Groundhog Day, but he's in the body of a different guest in the house. So he's constantly bumping into other guests who are him and future guests who will be him, and he never quite knows who to trust, and they're not always after the same thing, which is very strange. So that's The 7.5 Deaths of Evelyn Hardcastle. That took me 3 years to write and nearly killed me. The Devil and the Dark Water is a very different novel. It's set in 1634. It's about a very Sherlock Holmes and Watson style detective duo called Aaron Hayes and Sammy Pipps. And they board a boat leaving from Batavia, which is now Jakarta, on a 9-month voyage all the way back down to Amsterdam. But as soon as they get on the boat, weird, strange, demonic things start to happen. Strange symbols, livestock are slaughtered. There's something supernatural and weird going on this ship. Thankfully, Sammy Pipps is the world's greatest detective, the Sherlock Holmes of his day. Unfortunately, he's a prisoner, so he's locked up. He can't help, and we don't know what he's been accused of. So it's left to his Watson-style sidekick, who's Aaron Hayes, to solve the mystery in his stead. And they're both just nuts. I think is just the best. They're just big, crazy nuts books that were really fun to write.
I have heard you like speak about these books, and it still like amazes me how you describe them, especially when you started off. It's like, I hate talking, like doing a brief synopsis. I had a feeling you would say something like that.
I think every author does. It's not just me. I speak for the entire writing community. We all hate it because we are naturally a verbose lot. Even the short stories writers are a verbose lot. And then, like, if you ask us, that's what poets do. Poets are all about the one paragraph. Go pester them. Leave us alone.
I already have a feeling this is going to be a funny conversation. So we're going to talk about your first book, 7.5 Deaths, which you said nearly killed you. But it is a book that I still think about because it was just so mind-blowing, and the concept behind it. Like, what made you, not to give any spoilers, because I highly suggest that people need to go out and read it for themselves. Like, what made you think to write 7.5 Deaths, like in this weird, because it's like Agatha Christie, but with a mixture of science fiction, let's say.
Yeah. Okay, so basically, do you know what the fundamental problem is with Agatha Christie? I throw the question back at you. The fundamental problem with Agatha Christie is that she's written every Agatha Christie book, all of them. She's done them all. The just spiteful, horrible woman. So, like, if you want to write a golden age murder mystery like Agatha Christie, you can't, because she's done it. So every great plot twist, every great character, every great sort of like format, even structure, she's done it. She already did it. She wrote like 80 of them, and about 50 of them are superb, and the rest are merely adequate. Like, it's incredible body of work. So if you want to wade into that pond, you can't wade into that pond because you've got nothing to add. And that's what I discovered when I was 21, and I tried to write an Agatha Christie murder mystery, straight up the way she did it. And it was garbage. It was as bad a piece of writing as there were cereal packets that are better than what I wrote at 21. So I went away. I was like, I can't do this. I need an original idea, because every book she had an original idea, whether it was the way she'd reveal her protagonist or the antagonist or the structure or where she would hide the clues. There was always a great idea lurking in there somewhere, and I needed an original idea. So that was when I was 21. I didn't start writing 7 Deaths until I was 36, because that's how long it took me to come up with an idea that Agatha Christie had not already done. That's how far, and the sci-fi, the body swapping, the Groundhog Day, that's how far away from her I had to get to write a novel that was basically in her wheelhouse and in her genre. So that's what it was. And like, it was just about piling up influence, right? So I just went about my life. I had loads of jobs. I've had like the worst jobs and the best jobs in the world. Like but I went traveling. I left university and went traveling for 5 years. So I was doing jobs to carry on traveling. So I was piling all this stuff up and piling all these influences up. And this is kind of where I landed at the end of it. So that's my advice to would-be writers. It's like sack off being a writer and go travel for 5 years and don't have any responsibilities. It works a treat.
Dina, I feel like we should say like the vile woman part because this is recorded. Like, please don't sue us, the Agatha Christie estate, because he said that.
I did say it. And to be fair, I know a lot of the Agatha Christie estate people, and they are all very lovely, and you know me, and you know my tongue-in-cheek manner. So please don't sue these lovely, lovely librarians. They were just present at the house fire. They did not start it.
Okay, we're good then.
I've consulted our lawyer, who I assume is Cynthia over there, who's doing our interpretation for us. And we're fine. We're gold. We're good to carry on.
Okay. But I think that's why I loved it so much, because it was kind of like Agatha Christie, but it was way different. But it was also way different from any other mystery. And you kind of put like it, and it's not the same as it's definitely not the same as The Devil in the Dark Water. But one theme that seems to be connecting with both of them is like they deal with morality, like dealing with like coming at the decision on your own. Like, did you do that on purpose, or it just like kind of flowed out and it just seemed to happen? Like, two of your books had like a similar theme.
No, there's things I'm preoccupied by, I think. And I've always been preoccupied by. I did English and philosophy as a degree. So I'm fascinated by morality. I'm fascinated by philosophy. I'm fascinated by ethics and the ethics of the soul and what we owe each other as people and as cultures. And all of this stuff bothers me. It genuinely bothers me, especially when I see the way our society is going, where I think we're not preoccupied by philosophy. We're not preoccupied by what we owe each other. We're preoccupied by what we can get for ourselves and what we think we're owed and what we think people owe to us. So when I'm writing, there's a strange thing that happens where I can't stand outside my house screaming at the clouds. So I sit inside a small room and scream at a book. And I through that, I'm kind of, and then I have to sort of tamp it down, because my first objective is always to be entertaining. The first objective is always to understand that a reader could be watching Netflix or Disney, or they could be doing some sport or having dinner with their friends or a million other things. And I'm fighting for your attention and I'm fighting for your time. So my first concern is that my book is entertaining and that you enjoy it and that you want to carry on reading the pages and you don't think it's a waste of your time. That's my first application. And then the second is, can I talk about this stuff in a way that fits my story? Can I talk about it in a way that's not preachy, that doesn't lecture, that isn't pushing its way to the forefront of what I'm doing? It's just, it's in the background because my characters care about it, because I care about it. And if I can find a way to do that, that's what I'll do. But there's so much other stuff that has to happen first before you can even you've got to earn the right to do that, right? You've got to earn the right to talk about those things, because a book is a massive commitment, as you guys well know. Like, I don't know whether you can do it, but like, if I start a book, I've got to finish the damn thing. And like, if that book is bad 30 pages in, that's a nightmare. I know I'm in it for another month then. It's terrible.
I think Adina and I have dealt with that all the time. Like, we try to finish a book and it's just so painful, and we really try, and we have, and then we eventually have to, and then it's the worst experience of our life that we never ever want to talk about that book again.
Yeah, because you feel like somebody's purposely wasted your time. That's my sense of it. Like an author, and I do think authors have an awareness of this. Books can be very long, and we want to tell our stories, and unlike poets, we were making the joke earlier, unlike poets, we have a lot of words in which to do it. And sometimes we don't have editors to tell us, hey, look, you didn't need those 50 pages, or like, and you can go on and on and on. And I think you always have to have an eye on your reader and just be like, are they bored by this? Did we lose them? Was this not relevant? Like, there has to be something in it. There has to be paciness in it and enjoyment. And it has to be, or either that, you can just wallow in sorrow. You can do that as well. That works for some people. Naming no names.
Okay, that's good because we most likely might be on Agatha Christie's list. So let's leave it at that. I think you talked like a little bit about this, but maybe if you want to expand on it more, it seems like you do a lot of pre-planning because you met the author that you got mistakenly introduced as on the slide. He has like a board where he planned out his plots and everything. So I wanted to ask like a similar question. Do you pre-plan your plotting of everything? Do you have a board, let's say, because I know a lot of writers have that in saying like where everything has to go in the story?
No, so I've got a fairly weird method for this stuff. I plan everything, so it takes me 3 months of planning and research. So I allot myself 3 months before I start writing a word. So I will not write the first word of a novel until that 3 months of planning and research is complete. The planning and the research is all about going to the places or sort of the places that'll be featured in the story. So for Seven Deaths, I went and stayed in basically a super creepy manor house in France because it was the closest thing to that mansion that I could find. Really decrepit place, and I crept around there at midnight with a candle to try and get the feel of that ambience and the shadows and the darkness and what that felt like, and the weight of that sort of like gothiciness. Which is a writer word you definitely shouldn't look up, but it definitely exists. Gothiciness, yeah. Oh yeah, that's a genre. So I did that, and then for Devil in Dark Water, I flew out to Indonesia and had a potter around Indonesia into this old city that's based in the story. I went and sailed on a galleon, which is very similar to the galleon that's featured in the book. So I try and do all that sort of stuff. And while I'm doing that, I'm planning it. I'm thinking about, I start with an impossible murder, like, because I love impossible murders and locked room mysteries. Like, they're my favorite Christies. They're my favorite mysteries. I love them. So I'm always trying to write those. The problem with a locked room mystery is it's a stupid way to kill a human being. There's much easier, much simpler ways to kill a human being. I've heard. I should probably. Again, the lawyers are going to be all over me, aren't they? I've heard. Don't look in my garden, please. But if you're going to write a locked room mystery, you've got to come up with a really super compelling reason why somebody would be killed that way. So there's your plot. Like, that's your planning started, right? That's what you start with, and then I work backwards all the way through it. And I'm trying to spin characters and trying to find clues and all the rest of it. But the way I plan for both novels, I change it for each novel because I kind of want the planning to sort of reflect the type of novel I'm writing. So the planning for Seven Deaths was a massive spreadsheet. That was every 2 minutes of every character's day in the house. So I knew what everyone was doing, primary, secondary characters, and there's like 17 characters in that, but I knew all of them, what they were doing, where they would be. And the idea of that was so I could understand where they would be in the house, what they could overhear, what they would see, whether they would cross paths with anyone. Because that book, 7.5 Deaths, is a piece of clockwork. It just turns very intricately. One thing leads on to another, one thing leads to another. And I never wanted that to feel false. I never wanted it to feel like a trick. If you go back and read that book a second and third time, it all lines up. All the clues are there for you to find. The day is in front of you. I think it even tells you who the murderer is on like page 70 or something. Like, it's right there. And that's why I planned that one. And then for Devil, I planned it a very different way because I wanted that book to feel like more like an adventure novel. That had a lot more in common with sort of Conan Doyle and Conan Doyle's adventure stories, not just his Sherlock Holmes stuff. So I wanted that. So I planned that one with this thing that I called lighthousing, which is where I had a massive important plot point that I wanted to get to. And I put that on, I just drew that basically on a map. And then, almost like a ship trying to find its way to these lighthouses, then I would allow myself to write to the next lighthouse and write to the next lighthouse. So it was planned. The really important things were planned, but the spaces in between were not. And that's why it's got that sort of looser, hopefully more adventure-y feel. And then I've come up with a different planning method for my third book. So constantly trying to sort of like change the planning, because then it changes the way I feel about the book, if that makes sense.
No, it does. And I feel like we're going to get so many calls about there's an author who's saying that he knows how to kill people. But
all authors know how to kill people. That's how we write our books. We all do.
Say that.
Yeah. Oh, mate, we have committees every month. Honestly, you can hire our services. We'll write it for you.
And I have one more question before I pass it on to Athena. You did mention an author who is an inspiration, Agatha Christie. But is there another author that gave you another inspiration behind your books and your future books as well?
In a weird, do you know how we've just really annoyed the Agatha Christie estate? Should we go and annoy the Conan Doyle estate now? I think we should do that, right? Like, why not? Let's be completionist about this. Conan Doyle was an inspiration for Devil and Dark Water, obviously, when you read it, because it feels very much like a Sherlock Holmes and Watson style story. But the inspiration was because I absolutely hate Sherlock Holmes books. And the reason I hate Sherlock Holmes books is because Sherlock Holmes is a prick. Now, I don't know if you have that phrase in the US, but he's a dickhead. He's an idiot. He drives me wild. And if you look at, a lot of people know Sherlock Holmes through the modern adaptations of that work, right? And what you've got there is an actor playing Sherlock Holmes, and what they're doing is imbuing him with emotion. They're constantly doing it, and all the way through, the through line of those shows is he learns to love people, he learns to have an emotion. In the books, he never does. He never has an emotion. From first story to last story, he has no emotion whatsoever. He's a tool. Watson, in the background, is like, you know, he has like 3 wives and loses a daughter, and he sort of like opens a medical practice on Harley Street. And he's living this enormous life, like he was a war hero and all sorts. And it's brilliant. And then like we get that in one line at the beginning of every story, and then we're back to Sherlock Holmes, still living in exactly the same place he's always lived, smoking the same opium and having the same like concerns about things. So yeah, I love the mysteries, but I hated the character behind them. So when I sat down and wrote Devil and Dark Water, it was an attempt to make that character more interesting to me, and to do things with him that I don't think Conan Doyle wanted to do or had any inclination, because he was a rich, famous author. It didn't matter. But I got to play with it, and so I elevated my Watson character to the lead, because I always thought Watson was more interesting than Sherlock Holmes. So yes, an inspiration, because I hate him.
And I think that's a perfect thing to segue to Athena.
Your turn.
Okay. Yes, because I hate Sherlock Holmes so much. Not really. I don't. Sometimes.
Can I just 1 second? I've got to close this door behind me, because in the UK we're having this huge heat wave. Like, it's never been this hot in the UK. And the thunderstorm has just started, and my door's open, and the rain is lashing in.
Of course, go ahead.
Terrified that you all just saw my bum then. Sorry about that.
I'm sure nobody was looking.
Good.
So I wanted to ask you, because when I read Devil in the Dark Water, I found it really, really scary. I think Tabrija found it really scary. I could only read it like in the day with all my lights on or sitting outside.
Oh, wow.
Did you realize when you were writing it how scary it was going to be, or were you kind of too close to it to see it as scary?
I was too close to it. And I screwed that book up real bad. So like my first conception of that book was like this 200,000 word epic that had like equal parts in sort of Batavia, and then on the ship, and then on an island. Like, it was enormous, and it was supposed to replicate the novels of that period, right? It was supposed to be a 3-act structure, 3 books in one. Like, it was a mess. So by the time I got to the version that you guys read, I hated it so much. I truly, truly hated it, because it was such a labor to sort of like get through to that point. And as I was writing the horror stuff, and the horror changed as well, because the horror initially was much more of a Stephen King kind of horror. It was a body count, and it was a bit more bloody, and it was a bit more gory. And the problem with doing that when you're trying to mash up a murder mystery and a Stephen King-esque horror is that those two genres don't go together, because Stephen King-esque horror needs you to kill everybody, and a murder mystery needs you to keep most people alive because they're your suspects. So what I was doing was killing everyone down until only the murderer was effectively left and the detective. So that wasn't a murder mystery anymore. So I recompiled it, and I went back, and it became much more of a gothic horror, much more of a psychological horror, much more of an occult horror. And that was really worked well, because this sort of stuff was knocking around in this time period, and it'd always been part of the novel. But the more I got into it, and I think you can see my excitement for these scenarios, and you can see my excitement for the things I could do with that, like the symbols on the sails, and the sort of altars below deck, and the leper wandering around. All these things were just a joy to write after slugging laboriously through the wrong book for 2 years.
And that sort of leads me to my next question. Did you pick the setting first? Like you knew you wanted to write about that time period and the plot followed, or did you have a plot in mind and then you picked the time period after?
Both, actually, because I got the idea for this book because I was traveling around Australia when I was, I don't know, 23 or something, and I came across this exhibition in a maritime museum about the wreck of the Batavia. It's a real life story. You should go and look it up. It's more horrifying than the book, what actually happened. But within it was all this stuff that I wanted to write about. It was like seafaring in 1629, like this period. Like these ships didn't even have wheels at this point. This is how old the technology is. They don't even, when you think of an old ship in your mind, this is even older than that. It doesn't even have the technology that one of those ships would have had. So the people who boarded these ships only got on them because they were either recklessly brave or incredibly dangerous, like, and had nothing to lose. So that alone for an author is amazing. The ships of this period were just floating haunted houses. Like if you've ever been on one, that's immediately what they feel like. They're really gothic in of themselves. They're great spaces for a story. And a murder mystery requires, to me, a really great murder mystery requires isolation. It requires a set list of suspects and then for them to have no escape from the murderer. So it's almost a serial killer slasher type thing on top of a murder mystery. So a boat just gave me that. The moment they're out to sea, they're on their own. There's nothing that could be done. So when I read this in this museum about this true life story of the wreck of the Batavia, I knew I wanted to do something with it, but I had no idea what. So I went off and wrote Seven Deaths, and then when it came time to write my second novel, this was the thing that just immediately bubbled up. And I started doing the research, the historical research. Who was on the ship? What did they want? And characters just started to like come alive before me, fictional characters. And these people just began to emerge, and it just out of what was important in that time period and what these people would have been on this boat for. Like the plot just kind of, I can't even explain it. It just kind of like bubbled up. It was just sort of there. It made sense. And it gave me the impossible, the locked room mystery that I wanted. 3 locked rooms basically in this book as well. So sorry, that's an incredibly long-winded way of answering your question. But as I said, it's incredibly hot and I'm probably losing consciousness. It's difficult to say.
No, you definitely answered my question. Did you prefer writing one time period over the other? Like, did you prefer writing the 1600s or more of a golden age detective novel?
It's an interesting question because actually I don't think I wrote. There is no time period for for Seven Deaths. I'm sorry, that first novel. Like it's never referenced in the book. There's a few hints towards where it could be, but actually that is entirely based off Agatha Christie time. So it's just like it's meant to replicate the entire span of her writing, which is why you've got lots of different period technologies in there. You've got a gramophone, but then you've got a crank car. You've got telephones that don't work. You've got, if you look very closely, you'll notice there's a lot of technology in that house that shouldn't be there. And it's supposed to replicate the span over which she wrote. And it's supposed to fold in all the characters she wrote about as well. So basically the time period for that book is almost any time. And I didn't really do historical research for that. I had read her books inside and out, so I knew what was in her books. So I just used that. If she'd written about it, if she had it, then I took it. Whereas Devil was much more rigorous. That was months in the British Library. I travelled around. I asked questions. I had to talk for hours and hours and hours to people who'd been on board these boats, who'd built them and sailed them to understand how they worked, because the technology is it's so behind where we are that it's almost fantastical. You might as well be asking somebody magic, like how do you make this potion? Because it doesn't make any sense. Even the first principles of how they did it don't make any sense. So I used to be a journalist back in the day. So that process of going and asking questions was wonderful because I got to talk to people who are much cleverer than I am. And I love that. So that was probably the most fun to write.
Thank you. And I want to switch to an upcoming piece of writing you have coming out. You are going to have a story featured in a collection of ghost stories. Did you enjoy the process of writing a short story?
Well, I mean, you're assuming, Adina, that I've actually written the ghost story. And anybody who's ever followed my career knows that I am not one for doing things in advance. So that book, I'll probably start writing that in October because my deadline's December. That's roughly the way I work. Like I'm not one of those guys who hits his deadline. It's really a question of how many of them I sail past. I'm on what I missed 5 for Devil. I missed so far. I've missed 3 for this novel. So the short story is going to be anywhere between about 10 and 12. But like I'm looking forward to it because it's a different writing challenge. Like short stories have got their own rhythms and their own principles, and I enjoy going to learn about those and sort of like working through the problems of it. But I'm sure it'll be great.
I'm sure it'll be great too. Now I'm even more excited to read it, knowing how close to the deadline you were cutting it. Is there anything else coming up in the pipeline for you? Should we be expecting any more books in the near future, hopefully?
No, I'm the slowest writer in the world. So it takes me 2 to 3 years to write a book. And that's not even including time to go and edit it. It takes me a long time to put my ideas. I'm always trying to mash genres up and get things mixed up and play with things. So there's a lot of experimentation. So generally what I do is I'll write the wrong book first. I did that for Devil, I did that for Seven Deaths. And by wrong book, I mean I will literally write 90,000 to 100,000 words of the wrong story. And then it won't work. And then I will pull it apart, work out what was in it that I actually liked, and then I'll rewrite it again. And that will be a complete rewrite. So effectively the 100,000 words will get tossed away and I'll start again completely fresh. So that's where I am at the moment. So no, the book of short stories will be out, and then I've got some things that I'm doing for television, which maybe turn up here, there, and everywhere. And I've got a script for the television adaptation of Seven Deaths, so I'll be working on that. But nothing for a while. I'm
Sure, it'll be
terrible.
worth the wait.
Terrible at self-promotion. That's where I realized. Like I should just come with a list of things, but no, I'm so slow. I'm so terribly slow.
I know I'm very excited for when there's a TV show. I can't wait for that. So we do want to ask you about a few detective matchups. How we usually do this program is Tabrija and I will each present a fictional detective, talk about their strengths, weaknesses a little bit, and then we have the audience vote on which detective we think would crack the case first, or which detective you would hire if you were hiring a private detective. So we want to see how your opinions compare to the opinions that we've had during our previous programs. So we're going to present a few matchups.
Yeah, we fixed
for
it.
You. Yes, we fixed it. So now we
Hey, that's my name.
The correct person.
God, I was so much younger in that picture. That's alarming. That was before I had my daughter. Look what she's done to me.
It's before, right?
We need. It's recorded.
Oh,
It's recorded.
doesn't matter.
I
Doesn't
don't
matter.
think she'll be watching. She's probably.
I tell her
young for
every
this.
day. Look what you've done to me, Ada. Look what you've done to me.
All right. So the first matchup we have are the teen detectives. So Nancy Drew or the Hardy Boys.
This is almost a uniquely US phenomenon. I have never read either of these things, and judging by those covers, I never would. The Hardy Boys look like they're being beamed up by aliens, which is a bit of a problem. And Nancy Drew doesn't realize that her little magnifying glass is incredibly smudged and she won't be able to see anything through it. I mean, at this rate, they both look hopeless. I'm going to go with Nancy Drew because she's got better hair. That's what I got for you.
Unfortunately, the Hardy Boys don't ever get abducted by aliens, but you did pick, in my opinion, the correct choice, which is, of course, Nancy Drew.
Nancy Drew. Well done, Nancy. I hope you have many wonderful adventures with your excellent hair and ridiculous magnifying glass that clearly doesn't work.
She does. I want to be Nancy Drew when I grow up, personally. All right.
I think you make an excellent Nancy Drew. Just get a better magnifying glass.
Athena has it.
All right, so we'll have some British choices for you. Miss Marple or Poirot?
Poirot. Marple is just like, if she's not at the right hedge at the right time, that case doesn't get solved. So I don't see what good that is. If it rains and she's not doing a bit of gardening, the murderer gets away with it. So I'm all about Poirot and his little grey cells.
Oops, sorry. It was
no, it's not. This entire thing has been revealed to be a sham. It's a sham.
I think Tabrija and I both rooted for Miss Marple in that showdown. So
how?
Because, well, okay, in the defense of Miss Marple, I'm going to go back to what you said about Sherlock Holmes. Poirot is a prick.
No,
he is.
No,
he was. No,
he's a snob, but he's got a very large heart, and he shows it frequently. He gets involved with cases that he has no business being involved in because He has love for the case, or he loves for the suspect. Miss Marple is a busy. There's no heart in her whatsoever.
She's nosy.
Yeah, she's nosy. That's not her. She doesn't care. She screwed up so many lives because she was listening through a wall. Terrible, terrible woman. No, the actress who plays her in that show is excellent. So I'll give her that. But you're both wrong. This is void. I want this scrubbed from the record. Can we do that? I don't know.
All right. And then, Sarija, you want to present the next ones?
Yes. So we had like the US versus the UK, like two famous detective duos. So we had Barnaby and Troy from Midsummer Murders and Benson and Stabler from Law and Order SVU.
I have never watched either of these shows, but I will say that the dude on the right, because his forehead keeps going, like it's so desperately high, and you could fit another face on it and potentially two brains in there. I'm going to go with him because I think he'd be epic at solving crimes, just because I think you could get multiple brains in his head, and I think that's going to be a benefit. And these two on the left, the English guys, just look like utter dorks. So I don't know what use they would be in any given situation. And look at the ties. I mean, seriously, that's terrible tie game. Yeah, we're going with Benson and Stabler. Seriously, Stabby Stabler, the crime detective. Talk about nominative determinism. All right.
Well, unfortunately, everyone did not agree with you. I also was on Team Benson and Stabler.
But I made the convincing case.
Reaches the Midsummer Murders stand.
Right. Okay. I mean, I'm not as het up about this as the last one, but like, honestly, I think you should just go back and look at that guy's forehead, and I think you'll see it the way I see it. That's all I'm saying.
Well, now I do.
Okay.
If you look at a picture of him now, it's fuller. It's like all like now two brains. Now I can.
It's all top. Well, next time you have Joseph Knox on, you'll know the right answer for that.
And we know you don't like Sherlock Holmes, but
No.
if you had to pick one Sherlock Holmes, which one would it be?
Oh my God. Have you done this just to vex me? These are all the wrong Sherlock Holmes.
So who are the right Sherlock Holmes?
Jeremy Brett. Jeremy Brett is the correct Sherlock Holmes. Jeremy Brett did that thing. Jeremy Brett is, I take it's uniquely British, so you probably haven't seen it. But Jeremy Brett played Sherlock Holmes back in the 90s and 80s, I think, as well. And they did like full adaptations of a lot of the Sherlock Holmes stories. And what he managed to do was take those stories, which were excellent, and then infuse that character with a lot of heart. And his mannerisms and his gestures were pure like Sherlock Holmes, but he gave him a heart, and he's the ideal version of that. And he's also got a warmth with his Watson, which is wonderful. This Benedict Cumberbatch, not having that. He could be any detective in the modern day. He's not really Sherlock Holmes. Rubbish. Johnny Lee Miller, I don't know, but he's just hacker boy who happens to be a detective. And Robert Downey Jr., give me strength. No. Jeremy Brett every single time, please.
I don't think you're going to be too happy when you see who won this battle.
It's going to be Benedict Cumberbatch, isn't it? Because everyone fancies Benedict.
No.
No, you're going to wish it was.
You're right.
Oh, Lordy.
We think it was the Iron Man effect because when we did the program, we actually had even more Sherlock Holmes to pick from, and Robert Downey Jr. won. He beat all of the Sherlocks.
Don't possibly understand how, but yeah, okay, I'll take it because yes, he's Iron Man, and also he's a very, very good actor. So that's also wonderful. Whereas Benedict Cumberbatch is Benedict Cumberbatch in absolutely everything he's in, as is Johnny Lee Miller. This has just turned into a wide range of character assassination on these people. Their lawyers will be on the phone now as well. Agatha Christie's coming after me, the Conan Doyle estate, Benedict Cumberbatch and Johnny Lee Miller probably waiting outside my office to beat me up.
Well, we think for the last matchup, you're going to have nice things to say because we did pick characters from two of your favorite mysteries.
These are good.
So Walter Hartwright from The Moonstone and Philip Marlowe.
Oh no, that's The Woman in White.
Oh, The Woman in White. Sorry.
Woman in White.
And Philip Marlowe from The Big Sleep and many other Raymond Chandler books.
Oh, Walter Hartwright is brilliant because he's out of his depth, and Philip Marlowe is brilliant because he's out of his depth. But Philip Marlowe Oh, you see, I never knew reading The Woman in White whether Hartwright would get there. You don't ever believe he's the one driving that story. You don't ever believe he's in charge of his situation. Where Philip Marlowe always is in charge of his situation. Oh, this is great. This is too tough. Can you guys give me an hour? Have you got things to do and come back, and then I'm gonna
You can email us your response.
You can email.
You can think about it, get back to us.
I'm gonna go with Walter Hartwright because I bet everyone else has gone for Philip Marlowe, but there's a pound coin between them because they're both wonderful.
Well,
we don't
have any results for this one.
Hey!
Because we just picked, based on books you liked. I personally would pick Philip Marlowe, but
yeah, he's a great.
Makes sense. It's like
he's a brilliant character, and he's brilliantly written, and the books are wonderful. And yes, I would also on a different day probably choose Philip Marlowe, but today I have chosen Walter Hartwright, and his very wonderful coat, and I'm totally happy with what's happened.
I've also never read The Woman in White, so there you go.
Really good.
And we
really
do have
good.
a question from the chat. TJ said that you are a comedian. You're very funny. But the question is, since you are a cram writer, have you ever not met the due date for something being published?
Yeah, every time. As a point of pride almost. I never hit my deadlines ever. So I think I was saying earlier, I missed, because obviously Seven Deaths, I wrote that before I ever submitted it to a publisher. So there was no due date on that. That was written, I submitted, it was published after an edit. But Devil, I missed 3. No, I missed 5 deadlines for Devil. But in my defense, my baby daughter had just been born basically a month after I started writing that book. And then I completed it about 2 weeks after her second birthday. So she kind of delayed that. So that's entirely her fault, and I blame her entirely. And she's up for sale on eBay if anybody, wants her. But this book, so that's my second, and I'm writing my third book now. And I've missed 3 deadlines for this one as well. So yeah, I always miss my deadlines, but it's because it takes me so long to work out what book I want to write. And my feeling on this, without arrogance, is that it's your name on the book, nobody else's. Like, your publisher's down there somewhere, but fundamentally in big letters, it's your name. So if it's a piece of crap, you're the one who's going to live with it forever. Your publisher will put out another book that week. It doesn't really bother them. So if I'm going to miss a deadline, that's absolutely fine, because I'd rather know that the book on there is my book and I did it to the best of my ability.
I love that answer.
No, I love it too. Like, I'd rather have it you plan out in something you're proud of instead of just spit out and then it's something that you wish you could have changed. So you're putting more work into it. Yeah,
exactly. I'm immensely proud of my job and what I do, and that people like my books or don't like them. I'm immensely proud that people read them and have an opinion on them, because I tried really hard to make them good. I tried to make them, I make them layered. I make them full of things that I think are important. They're not just about a person dies and a person investigates, but I want that to be as good as it can be. I want these characters to live on the page. I want them to talk about things that are important. And I want you to feel you got your money's worth at the end of that. And I would feel horrible if I put a book out that I felt had shortchanged anybody, including myself.
And we do have another question in the chat, a 2-part question. Does Mr. Stewart use index cards or notebooks for quick ideas or for his research? And then I guess when you're actually writing your book, do you use Microsoft Word or a special software?
No, so I use a bunch of stuff. So I've got these notebooks, which some friends of mine and the special writing notebooks. They have character pages in there. They have note bits, scenes, plot sections. So I use those to organize my thoughts. I've got one of these things. This is from I think 1982. It's so old, but that sits by my computer just so I can quickly make notes as I'm going through things. And then I've got 1,000 notebooks which I write things on. I've also got, and this is not relevant to the question, I've always got these incredibly dodgy Chinese sweets, because I used to live in China and I fell in love with them when I was in China, and you can't buy them anywhere else. And I'm not sure what's in them because it can't be good because they're Chinese. But I have these shipped over. So I munch these on an unhealthy basis. But yeah, there's absolutely words scattered everywhere across. I use Scrivener, I use Google Docs, I use Google Sheets. I'll write on Microsoft Word, because sometimes when I'm stuck, moving word processor helps me get going again. And I don't know what the psychology of that is, but it's true. So I have like about 4 word processes that I will constantly be switching between to get myself moving, and which seem to help me. So again, I probably didn't answer your question. I'm terribly sorry.
I think you answered it.
No,
Definitely.
you did.
Thank you.
And you
Thank
answered
you.
a question we didn't even have to ask, which is what are your favorite snacks? So, which was not my next question, but maybe it should have been.
No, I just let me keep talking. I'll answer all of them without any prompting. Like all I can do is just chat endlessly about nonsense.
Well, we did want to ask you to share what some of your favorite mysteries are to read.
I think the 5 books that we. Oops. Oh yeah, there it is.
Or
Oh,
you
there
can
they
tell us
are.
a little bit about why you like these books.
I like all of these books because, and this is again going to sound incredibly arrogant, I don't like mystery books that much as a genre. I think it's a very easy genre because the expectation in mysteries is that you're going to take a character and write 1,000 books with them at the center of it. I find it's very easy for them to become formulaic and repetitive, and that's not what I'm personally in writing and reading for. I'm fascinated by structure in novels. I absolutely love things that mess with structure and perspective. I love things that try to fool you, not just with the plot, not just with like people lying to you, but how the book is written and the way it's constructed and what it's doing. And all of these do that in some way. So The Big Sleep by Raymond Chandler is just a wonderful character story. That's like, if you take away the mystery of that, you've got a character who is incredibly worth investigating and being drawn into. Everyone's murky, everyone's doing stuff for terrible reasons. It's really interesting, and all the conclusions come out of the characters. They don't come out of like, I wanted more money so I did this. They came out of deep rooted flaws in all of the people in the book, which is always the best kind of mystery for me. And then there were none by Agatha Christie. If you boil that down to its structure, you will see it absolutely everywhere. It's the basis, and then there were none is a slasher fic. So if you've ever watched a slasher movie from the 80s, and then there were none is the first slasher film. It's about a group of isolated people called to an island. They've all done something wrong. They've all transgressed in some way, and they're picked off one by one until there's no one left except the killer. That is a slasher movie, and she invented it. And she invented it in about 42 or something like that. And slasher fics turned up in 80 and claimed that, like, Halloween's the first one. Nonsense, my friends. So that is fascinating. Like, as a piece of like historical construction, like she created a genre, and she did it so often through her career. It's remarkable. And she doesn't get the credit for that. She gets credit for like writing amazing plots, but not for creating genres, which she did over and over and over again. Weirdly, she didn't create Golden Age crime, which everyone attributes to her. It's also fascinating. LA Confidential by James Ellroy. You've got to read that book 3 times to make sense of any of it, which I think is bold, and I think it's very brave. But if you read it once, that staccato style it's got, it doesn't make any sense whatsoever, and it's really hard to follow. And I love the fact that Ellroy felt confident enough to be like, fuck it, everybody will read this twice. They just will, because they know who I am and they know what I'm trying to achieve. And it's so hard boiled and so great, but the structure of it is everything. And it's 3 characters and 3 stories overlapping and intertwining. It's brilliant. The construction of it is fantastic. So take away the writing style, and just the characters are also great. Journey Under the Midnight Sun is, it's, have you read it? Have you guys read Journey Under the Midnight Sun? It's so Japanese, and like it's truly, and I say that like this, you notice the US has a style of writing a mystery, the UK has a style of writing a mystery, the Japanese have a style of writing a mystery, and Journey Under the Midnight Sun is very Japanese. It's brilliant. Its big trick is that the 2 suspects in the novel, the 2 people you're following, you're never in their head, you never hear their thoughts, you only ever find out about them from people who intersect with them, and it's told over about 20 or 30 years. So it's all these people who keep bumping into them and having thoughts and opinions on them. And of course, everyone bumps into them, has a different thought or opinion on them. So you never know where you stand with these 2 people. But there is all the time a murder mystery running right through the center of it. And it's genius. It's brilliant. It's the translation is not incredible, but the story's really good. The characters are really good. And the way it's written is just marvelous. So love that. And then The Woman in White by Wilkie Collins it's just a formative novel, while also being a great novel. So much of what we consider to be murder mystery 101 is in that book. So much of what we consider to be intriguing character detective traits are in that book. So much of like why people do stuff is in that book, and it's just a great gothic tome on top of it. It's got a lot of gothic drippy tactileness. You come out of that book and you want to have a wash. It's great. So, and so much of what I do is kind of rooted in that book. So it's completely wonderful for that reason.
I love the
Thank
women
you.
in white. Yeah.
Ah, yeah.
Now I want to read it.
Please do. It's so good. It's generally like, sometimes it can feel, I think people look at that book and maybe think it will be a touch laborious because it's old really and it is formative, but actually it's just a brilliant story. Just really well told as well. Really great.
It's so good. So we have a couple of last minute questions. Another one from TJ. She asks, where are you from, or where are you currently living? And how long have you been writing? What inspired you to write? And we're going to talk about the last two part of the questions in the later slide, in the next slides, TJ. So why don't we focus on like where are you currently living and how long have you been writing and what inspired you to write?
I'll tell you what, TJ, I've been around too long to answer the question, hey, Stu, where do you live when a stranger asks me on the internet? I'll tell you, that's my answer to that. What's your mother's maiden name as well? I live in England. I'm originally from Liverpool, but I've lived everywhere, absolutely everywhere. So I left university, I went traveling for 5 years. I've lived in the Middle East, I've lived in China, I've lived in Australia, I've lived everywhere. So I'm currently live outside of London in the UK with my wife and my little baby. So we'll probably be down here for a little bit. How long have I been writing? I was a journalist for absolutely years. So that's a two-part question, I think. I haven't been writing novels. I was a journalist. I loved being a journalist. It was the best job. It's still my best job because, as I said earlier, I got to go out and chat to interesting people, and I like talking to people. I like hearing people. I like listening to what they have to say and learning from them. I think it's great. So I did that until where did I do that till? About 2016, I think. I was living in Dubai at the time, of all places, and that's where I got the idea for Seven Deaths. I couldn't write Seven Deaths in the desert because it's just a gloomy English story. I had to come back to England. I had to be surrounded by misery and gloom and the class system and tumble down houses. So I came back to the UK to write it, and I've kind of been here off and on ever since. What was the other part of the question? There was 3 parts, right? There was how long have you been writing and where do I live?
And what inspired you to write?
Oh, Agatha Christie, purely Agatha Christie. So I read all those books between about 8 and 12, just every single one of them back to back. My next door neighbour used to bring them around from car boot sales because you could buy them back then for about a penny each. So she would bring them around in a stack and I would read them. And then next weekend she would turn up with a new stack of them. And I would just read them over and over again. So they're just formative for me. They are just what I consider to be the best books. They're really Moorish. They're really clever. They play with structure. Everything about me that I am a writer now comes out of my love of what I found in those books. So even before I knew that I wanted to write a book, they were sort of a weird flag in the distance. And I always remember that when I got to the last Agatha Christie book when I was about 12 or 13, and no more books were coming, I'd read everything and just repeats were turning up in the car boot sales. And I talked to my mum and was like, where have all the books gone? And she was like, oh, there are no more. Agatha Christie's dead. And I honestly, at that point, no one in my family had died. So I was like, I don't get her. What do you mean she's dead? She's like, she's dead. She's gone. I'm like, I don't. What do you mean? And then that's my introduction to real death, proper death. And the fact that she wouldn't write any books for me. So my idea was that if I could write the books, I would never be without Agatha Christie books. And that's kind of what it started.
Aww.
I know. It was sweet, wasn't it? I was a very sheltered 12-year-old, I now realise. But yeah, no tragedy has befallen me at all. So there you are.
Okay, so before we end today's hilarious program, I've not laughed this much in a long time. So Adina and I started this thing where we ask our special guests to what we call here in the States book talk. It's
Okay.
what librarians do to give a short, like, commercial speech about their book, about an author's books. So now we're going to turn the tables onto you and to ask you to do like a 1-minute speech on why our audience here and people who are going to watch the recording should check out The 7.5 Deaths and The Devil in the Dark Water.
It'll be fun.
Okay.
Yeah, the end. Be great. You'll have a good time. You'll enjoy it. Like, you pick up a book to be entertained and they will entertain you. And if they don't entertain you, you can stop and read another book. But I've only written 2 books. I'm not one of those authors who've written like 500 books. So it's not like you have to get, you know, knee deep in the swamp of Stuart Turton. Like, it's a puddle. It's yay big. You can just wade in a little bit. And I promise you, the other thing I do is that no 2 of my books are the same. I've only written 2 books. That's a big claim. But so far, my books are never the same. So if you get on with 7 Deaths and you absolutely love it, Devil will be something else entirely, and you may like it or you may not. But, you know, if you don't get on with 7 Deaths, you may like Devil, and vice versa. So just have a go. I mean, come on, like, life is long. There's loads of hours.
Sold me on it.
I know.
I had already read them.
That was perfect. Okay, let us, oh, let me go back. Nope, wrong. Okay, there we go. So, like Stuart said, he only has 2 books, but there are 2 amazing books, The 7.5 Deaths of Evelyn Hardcastle and The Devil in the Dark Water. Both are available at the New York Public Library in print, ebook, and audiobook format. You and also keep a lookout for The Winter Spirits. That will be coming out next year. Hopefully Stuart will meet his, well, he won't meet his deadline.
I won't, no. You might as well strike my name off the front of that right now, quite frankly.
It'll be there. It'll get there. It'll get there. And please join me and Adina next month. We will be doing a 2022 wrap up of our favorite mysteries of this year so far. Make sure to register for the event. I believe Adina has put a link in the chat. Yes, she did. It'll take place on Tuesday, August 23rd at 3 p.m. You definitely don't want to miss that if you're a big mystery lover. And thank you so much, Stuart, for joining us from the hot UK. I hope you go out and cool yourself. I know both me and Adina absolutely love this conversation. I hope the rest of the audience loved this conversation. And thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us.
Oh, thanks so much for having me. It was a pleasure. I enjoyed it so much. Thank you, everybody. And thank you for our ASL interpreters who've done, I imagine, a miraculous job.
Yes, they did. And thank you to our ASL interpreters. And I hope to see everyone next month for another round of Dueling Detectives. And we leave that with everyone to take care.
And thank you all for asking questions. So it was so amazing to talk to you. Thank you so much.
Bye, guys. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you so much to our amazing interpreters. We really appreciate it.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. It was really wonderful. Thank you.
I'm glad you enjoyed it.